Thanks for listening to the For the Campus podcast, where each week we sit down and have discussions about Christian faithfulness in the college campus. To learn more about City Church Tallahassee and our ministries, head to citychurchtallahassee.com.
Hey guys, this is Hunter Levine, college pastor at City Church Tallahassee, and I wanted to give you a quick intro about today's podcast. I'm really excited for you to hear about this as our executive director, Ashlyn Portero, interviews IMB staff member and church member Sarah Host. In this podcast, they talk about something really important, which is how can you use your summer in this time, this challenging season that we're in, to live on mission for the gospel of Jesus Christ. Sarah shares with us some awesome opportunities that the IMB presents, and they have an all-around great conversation about how we can take simple steps of obedience. We hope that you guys enjoy.
All right. Well, it is great to be here with Sarah Host, you are a student mobilizer with the IMB. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about what global missions looks like for students right now, especially in the current circumstances that we're in, where a lot of plans have been changed and a lot of trips have been, grounded and canceled. But we obviously know that the Great Commission hasn't been stopped. And so we want to talk about just what student faithfulness looks like in the realm of global missions. And I'm really excited to have you speak to some of the opportunities for students to take part through the IMB. So kind of as we get started, if you can just tell us first a little bit about yourself and your role with the IMB, and maybe even just briefly what the IMB is, because I know we talk about it at City Church, but we probably have some students who maybe still aren't familiar or at least haven't had much exposure to the work that the IMB does. So just hear a little bit about you and your role and how that all works together.
Sure. Well, my name is Sarah Host. I'm from Crystal River, Florida, and I graduated from Florida State last year. City Church has been my church home for the past 4.5 years, and I'm currently a student mobilizer with the International Mission Board, otherwise known as the IMB, but that is the official mission sending agency for Southern Baptist churches, such as City Church. So when they send a family, they send a couple to go serve overseas, they send through the International Mission Board. And so my role as a student mobilizer allows me to meet and connect with college students and church staff to just share about the missions opportunities and the pathways for students to be able to go overseas and serve with the International Mission Board.
Awesome. That's so good. So kind of thinking about, obviously you are a student mobilizer now, and I know that you have traveled some, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit. But kind of dialing it back to your sort of journey through global missions, what was your first, kind of exposure to global missions, and what did that look like for you with your eyes being open to just what it means to be a part of really the work of God across the world?
So I did grow up in a Southern Baptist church, and we gave to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering every year. And so I had always heard the name IMB and had watched the videos that they released every year, just like we give at Christmas on the Moon to Lottie Moon. But my pastor's daughter was actually serving full-time with IMB, and she served a journeyman term, which I can share about later with that's available for college students. But when she came back stateside and she shared about the mission work that was being done in South Asia, it was really impactful for me, just being able to hear and understand the need to go to the nations. So the idea of missions was not as far removed anymore because I knew this particular person who was serving full time and was sharing these stories about real people and the things that she was able to take part in to make the Lord's name known.
That's awesome. And I love that it starts with more personal just interaction and, through relationships and stories. And that's something that I think we've seen to be really fruitful and impactful at City Church is, the more that you have a frame of reference for what it looks like to go by learning from others, the Lord usually uses that in some way in your life. So where have you traveled for missions, specifically with the IMB, but even just, maybe church mission trips? What does that look like for you?
Sure. So starting off, my first mission trip was to South Dakota because that was, yes, I know, but that was a church plant that was actually taking place from my home church. And so our pastor was just really a mentor to this church plant that was going on in South Dakota. So I had gone there 2 summers in a row in high school and kind of learned the importance of missions in the context of our nation. But then it wasn't until the summer after my junior year of college that I went overseas. And so I had served the first summer after my freshman year on a camp staff in Texas and really enjoyed that. And then I took summer classes, but then it was really on my heart to use my last summer wisely before I graduated. And so I sat down with Lance Beecham, my campus ministry director, and we talked about the International Mission Board. And I had learned about it growing up and just the importance of going, and I'd never done it before, and it was a burden. And so I learned about Nehemiah Teams, which is one of the programs and pathways that IMB provides for students. And I kind of had it made up in my mind that I wanted to go to Africa and teach English and do that. So those were my first 2 preferences. And I really did think that I had to put down all 3 preferences because I am a rule follower. And so I saw this CrossFit and language in the Middle East and just kind of put it as a 3rd placeholder there. But funny enough, that's exactly where the Lord sent me.
Wow, to the Middle East.
To the Middle East for my first mission trip. And so I certainly felt ill-equipped. But mentors and just godly people in my life had reiterated that, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called, and we're all called. And so I was able to move forward with just simple steps of obedience. And so I spent about 2 months there, and it is a closed country. And so my main purpose for being there was a university student. So I studied Arabic for 10 hours a week.
Wow.
And then I went to the local CrossFit box, and that's how I got to know people.
Wow.
And just stayed in shape, and then went out to eat and had some great Middle Eastern food afterwards.
That's awesome. And I mean, just to hit on a couple things that you're saying for, as students are listening and thinking through this. One, that, we might, depending on, some of us don't have really any preconceived notions about what global missions looks like, but other people, especially if you have like some exposure to maybe you've grown up in a church or you've been on a short-term mission trip or something like that, you might be thinking that all missions work or sending opportunities look the same. But like you were living in a closed country, going to CrossFit, being a university student, that's just I'm thinking about my view of missions growing up, and that's so different. And in so many ways, is still a big leap, but feels accessible. Like, okay, there's lots of different opportunities for people, just depending on, what your interests are and what you're, maybe equipped to do or want to do. So I think that's a cool thing, just to know that there's such a diversity of opportunity. And obviously the whole world is out there waiting for people to go. And then I just want to hit on one other thing too, that you said about going to serve with the church plant in South Dakota, and how that was really a mentorship and an ongoing relationship between your church and them. And that's something that I think at City Church, we really want to establish that it's not just when we're sending people, whether it's students or families or individuals or whoever, that, we're not just like kind of casting them out and then it's like, okay, you're on your own, go do it. We want to have those long-term, relationships and friendships and really support people. So I love that that's something that it sounds like it really shaped kind of your view of what, missions is a true partnership. So, okay, let's talk about kind of involvement for students. Is global mission something that every student should be thinking about? I know you spoke a little bit to, you don't have to be equipped with one specific set of giftings or abilities or experience, but what would you say to someone who has never been on a mission trip and is maybe just learning about all of this? How would you kind of counsel them?
Sure. So I would definitely say that yes, Christ's command to go and make disciples is for every believer, although that might look a little different. So some are called to full-time mission work overseas, while others are called to make disciples in their local context. And especially for college students, the Lord has placed you on your college campus. And so you're usually there for 4 years and just making the most of those 4 years to be obedient. And so in a local context, for example, you can learn to pray for the lost to give financially so that others may go, or take short-term trips to meet the need of a full-time team that's in need of support. And so here at City Church, we have 3 different families that are serving overseas full-time with the IMB. And so if you've never been before or you'd like to learn about missions, I would definitely say that a great first step would be to ask how your local church is involved with global missions. Ask about the ministry that each of these families are involved in. Ask about their prayer needs and start to develop those personal relationships. And then as you do that, you begin to partner with them in their ministry, and you're seeing what the Lord is doing through them, and then asking the Lord to burden your heart for the lost. And that might lead you to being able to go over to their context and being able to serve with them short term, or being able to serve with them for a longer period of time. But then I do want to say that you can definitely visit imb.org/pray to read about the work that's being done and specific prayer needs and requests from around the world. They're updated every single day, and just to know what exactly is going on. And when you give to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, what these families, what these individuals are able to do because of our obedience and our role to the Great Commission.
That's awesome. And I want to just echo what you're saying about the IMB website is, in and of itself, you can spend hours on there just looking through the different people groups and prayer requests. And even just the creative resources that we found through City Church with photographs and video. It just really opens your eyes to just what a great need there is, for people to go. So I would definitely encourage that. And you can learn, as you mentioned, like about the Lottie Moon Christmas offering and some of these other efforts that we take part in that really, can begin with, giving a financial gift or praying a prayer, something that is a little more immediate and maybe feels simple, but it really is amazing how the Lord uses that to foster kind of this ongoing just love for the nations. And as you said, the more invested you are, I think the more it weighs on your heart and stays in your mind. So that's awesome. So kind of just thinking for a moment about the Great Commission. And as you said, the Lord commands all of us to go. And the reason that we send and the reason that we go is because first God's word tells us to, the scriptures command us to go and make disciples. And so I would love for you, just on a personal note, to kind of share how your growth in scripture has shaped your understanding of the Great Commission, and you spoke to locally, whether that's a college campus or wherever you are in your life, and then also globally.
Absolutely. So when I was younger, of course, I was like, well, to be a missionary, you have to go and spend your entire life and be overseas. But no, if you are a follower of Christ and you are being obedient and walking in the way of Scripture, then you are called to missions, whether that be locally or globally. And I'm always brought back to Romans 10:14 that says, "But how are they to call on him in who they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching to them? And how are they to preach unless they are sent?" And so it is a reminder to me specifically that regardless of the location, I am sent. And so being able to use that wisely and to make those relationships. And so locally within my church, am I seeking out someone that I can pour into? Am I also seeking out someone that can pour into me and speak into my life? How often am I sharing my faith in a local context of my neighbors? Even in this pandemic, I was reminded of the fact that I don't really know my next door neighbors. And so starting to have conversations when we were out on walks, but then globally. So when I did serve overseas, I developed lifelong relationships, and I still speak to my Middle Eastern friends to this day.
That's awesome.
I was just FaceTiming her the other week, but just texting her this morning, actually, just checking in and seeing how we were doing. And, she asked me how it was not being in church on Easter, but also they're beginning Ramadan. And so it's very hard for them to not be with community. And so just being able to plead that she will come to saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, and knowing that our relationship still continues regardless of location, but just overall learning to be used where the Lord has us in whatever season that may be.
That's awesome. And that, I mean, you make such a good point that right now, obviously, most of us can't travel, and we definitely can't travel very far. And yet technology is kind of giving us this opportunity to sort of stay connected across the world. And so I'm curious to see maybe how the Lord uses this time, as we're kind of, now's a great time to learn, and to reach out and to try to build relationships even cross-culturally. And it'll just be cool to see how the Lord uses that when maybe we can move around the world a little more. So especially thinking about students who are exploring global missions. So for those students who, maybe they're listening to this and they've been thinking about it, or they're interested in taking a next step, obviously things look different right now. And so I would love for you to talk just a little bit about maybe what some typical student engagement looks like with the IMB, maybe some sending opportunities that do exist, because Lord willing, we'll be able to travel again one day, hopefully sooner rather than later. But also, what are some opportunities that are available to them right now in this season too?
Sure. So typically, IMB has a number of different pathways ranging from a 1-week trip to spending the summer. So that's what I did with Nehemiah teams, and you're spending 52 days abroad in strategic locations and partnering with those teams that are there in whatever ministry context that they do. And that ranges. But then there's also semester-long opportunities, and that program's called Hands-On. So Hands-On is when you're able to go and you are always given a partner. And this is especially a neat opportunity, in my opinion, because it's partially funded by the IMB, and you get to spend 15 weeks and just be able to jump in and kind of see what it's like to serve as a missionary in a longer context. But then there's also a 2-year program for students right after they have graduated college. They must have a bachelor's degree, but then they get to serve full-time with the IMB as a journeyman, and that's a 2-year program. So just like my pastor's daughter did, that is fully funded. And so because of the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, they are able to go and not have to worry about support raising, and they are given insurance and housing, and they really just get to go along with a partner as well. So you're never doing this alone. You always have support on the field as well as whatever opportunity or program that you're doing. And then sometimes that can lead into full-time and career opportunities, such as being able to graduate from medical school and then use your medical degree on the field and be able to meet physical needs in addition to sharing the gospel with those that need it most.
That's amazing. And yet, I mean, that's just such a cool vision to think about, that, you could be, I mean, for students who are listening, it's like, everyone's sort of thinking with the end of college in mind of, okay, I've got to graduate and get a job or go to grad school, or what's my next step going to be? And to know that your next step potentially could be 2 years somewhere around the world, and you are paid for that, and you get to develop relationships and live on mission and just live life, in a totally new culture. I mean, that's just a really cool opportunity to think about. And it almost, I think, going back to what you said about wanting to be wise about using your summer, I think that's a challenge for all of us, is just, especially at the time in your life when you're graduating from college and kind of the whole world is open to you. And that can be scary in a lot of ways, but to have an opportunity like this, whether it's a journeyman term or, something similar, using your degree to go and serve around the world, that really kind of puts it into a different perspective, that yes, the whole world is open to you, and let's use that for God's glory. So, okay, so talking about Stateside Summer and some of the things that are available right now, how will that, for a student who, is here and is going to maybe try to engage with some of those opportunities this summer, how will that help prepare them for future sending initiatives? And as they're kind of thinking about, maybe getting involved a little bit at first, maybe with this longer term goal of being sent longer term, how can Stateside Summer help prepare them now for that?
Sure. So because this isn't our typical summer, and we can't physically go to the nations, the IMB mobilization team has designed what's called Stateside Summer 2020. and you can participate as an individual, with a friend, or as a group. And so this pandemic should not stop us from serving God and others right where He's placed us. And so right now that's in our country, our home country. So what a time to grow in a healthy understanding of missions and to serve our country right now and being able to love our neighbor well. So being on mission should not be about a specific location, but rather joining the Lord where He has us at work. And so with the hope and the idea of being obedient in all seasons and situations, Stateside Summer 2020 really provides some opportunities to be able to first learn about what missions is. And so if you're a new believer and trying to figure out, okay, I'm supposed to go and make disciples of all nations, what does this look like? Well, we have a number of resources available, so you can learn about missions through our IMB podcast. And so if you enjoy listening to podcasts like this, you can find our missions podcast. And we also have the IMB Pray app, so learning how to pray, and the Explore Missions course, which is for free on the IMB website. So if you're not taking a summer class this summer and you want to just be able to use this time well, I encourage you to look at that course that's available for free. But then there's also an opportunity to come together as a group and form a digital summer team. And so you can hold each other accountable, pray together, serve together. So when things start to open up a little bit, learning how to do that in a healthy and appropriate way, but being able to see the people groups that are represented in our hometowns and refugees and the opportunities that are available through that. And then we've also listed a number of books that you can read.
Awesome.
So if you want to form a book club and read through some of the top missions-focused books, that's a great starting point as well. And then learning to mobilize your own friends and church and campus to be just like city churches for the gospel and for the city. So being able to use that well and be obedient in that. And at Florida State, we have a number of international students that come to Tallahassee to study, and they're here for a number of years. And so what would it look like to be able to establish friendships with them? And it might start out with having English conversation and allowing them to practice, but through that, you're able to learn who they are and where they come from, and allow that to be an opportunity to present the gospel to them, because the nations are here as well. And so just being able to use this time well and to be obedient in all seasons and situations.
That's awesome. And I mean, I want to just reiterate what you said about, the Explore Missions course. We actually piloted that with a few students for the advanced London trip that we didn't get to go on. That was so sad, such a bummer. But I mean, it's pretty intense. But if, like you said, if someone's not taking classes this summer, you're getting like a sort of like a mini crash course in maybe theology of missions. It's, starting from the Old Testament through the New Testament to kind of the modern missions movement. I learned a lot from that and really enjoyed going through it. But yeah, and I love your encouragement to kind of engage locally too. I actually had a conversation partner in college, and my friend was from China, and she was here getting a PhD, and it was amazing to, just to get to know someone who has grown up in a culture, completely different than my own, and the Lord used that to grow me too, and thankfully got to share the gospel with her, and we really talked, about a lot of different aspects of life and faith. So I love your encouragement to do that, because sometimes I think we can, if we are comfortable with the idea of going across the world, that can sometimes, jump out at us before we even think about, am I convicted or burdened by the people who are right around me? So I think that's a great challenge for all of us to think about too. So kind of mentioning books and podcasts, and I think we're all looking for those things this summer. Well, I don't know. Students are just finishing up, so they might be tired. But when you come back around and your energy levels are ready for it, what are a few resources that maybe you personally would recommend to a student, like a favorite book or a podcast, just that have been most impactful for you in kind of exploring global missions?
Absolutely. So I would definitely say David Platt's Radical podcast is always great and just clear and understanding of what our role is and answering some of those tough questions that we have about Scripture and how it's appropriately interpreted. But then I actually just finished reading Evangelism as Exiles by Elliot Clark, and that was really helpful in his sharing of his missions opportunities and his service overseas, and then now that he's back in America, what that looks like as well.
Wow.
But then the Joshua Project is also a really great resource to learn about some of those unreached people groups and the unreached and unengaged people groups, meaning that they've never had access to the gospel and they've never heard. And so just learning where those places are at and why it's important to go to those places and just be able to see the missions involvement in those particular areas. And then a last resource I will say is please follow us at IMB Students on Instagram or Facebook as well. We're really relying on social media right now during this time. But we are going to put together a number of just opportunities for this summer. It's going to be monthly, but we'll do virtual prayer walks. We're partnering with some of the field personnel to be able to use their area and live stream or just take pictures and be able to post that so you can follow along. And then our desire is for you to participate in your neighborhood as well and to be able to be praying about the same things. But then there's also going to be some town halls available, virtual town halls.
Okay.
So representatives from the European Affinity, Sub-Saharan Africa Affinity, Central Asia, just all over the place, they'll be able to share about some of the things that are going on in their region, the things that they're doing, and then provide an opportunity for Q&A, interaction with students, and just figuring out their role in missions and what that looks like.
Awesome. And we're going to be continuing to hopefully share and we'll be, retweeting and reposting some of the things coming from IMB students and also talking more about specifically how through City Church U will be encouraging students to get connected. But and you might have already said this, but just to kind of reiterate it for everyone, if somebody wants to get a group together and sign up for Stateside Summer, where should they go to do that?
Yes, go to imb.org/Stateside Summer, and you will be directed to a sign-up link. And it does not cost anything. It's free. We want you to be resourced and equipped and growing this summer so that you'll be able to go. And so you can preference or you can decide what you want to focus on this summer. So there is absolutely no pressure to click every single option. If what you want to do is form a book club and read this summer, do it. If what you want to do is learn how to pray for the lost, focus on praying for the lost and grow in those spiritual disciplines. That way we can have a clear and healthy understanding of what missions is. But know, too, that missions is not canceled. So being able to use this time well. And if you are interested in serving for a semester, the fall hands-on project is still going on. And so the deadline for that will be June 1st. If you are interested in hearing more about some of those positions, they may be as unique as CrossFit in language or just joining on the university campus in another country. But go to the IMB website, go to the students portion, and you'll be able to select hands-on and see the titles for those different job listings, essentially. But then also, if you're a graduating senior or you're graduating after the summer or after next semester and you're interested in serving for 2 years, start the journeyman process and commit to serving for 2 years overseas and see what the Lord can do through you.
Awesome. Well, it has been really fun to get to have you here. I know you're connected, a City Church member and connected through the student ministry, and then also just to get to kind of bridge this gap between the local church and the IMB. And so, I think we're really praying to see students activated this summer, even as we're waiting to actually go, that, we know that the Lord can be preparing our hearts and our minds now. And so I'm grateful for you taking the time to share all of this with us. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ashlyn.
Thanks again for listening to the For the Campus podcast. If this podcast was helpful for you, please take time to share it with others. Also, feel free to reach out to us online. Have a great day.